38 years old, David had done everything right. The degrees, the retirement account, the budgeting apps, the investing books, the spreadsheets, especially the spreadsheets. On a cold Tuesday morning, before the rest of the house woke up, he opened the same net worth tracker he had been updating for more than a decade. 11 years, 400 paychecks, thousands of careful financial decisions. His net worth had increased by just $14,000. Not because he was reckless, not because he was lazy, and not because he didn't understand money. The truth was worse. David understood money better than most people ever will. And that might have been the problem. Because this isn't a story about financial ignorance. Ignorance is easy to fix. You read a book. You learn a lesson. You change a habit. What trapped David was something far more dangerous. The same thing trapping millions of educated professionals today. A system that rewards intelligence at work, while quietly punishing it in wealth building. And before you dismiss that as conspiracy thinking, consider this. The wealthiest 1% of Americans control nearly 40% of all stock market wealth. The bottom half of the country controls about 1%. The gap isn't just large. It's almost impossible to visualize. If wealth were distance, the top 1% would be approaching the moon while the bottom 50% would still be crossing a few states. So here's the question. If millions of intelligent, hardworking, financially literate people are following the advice they're given, why do so few ever reach real financial freedom? And more importantly, who benefits when they don't? Keep that question in mind, because the answer has very little to do with intelligence, and everything to do with ownership. They were playing the game correctly. That is the first thing you need to understand. In the late 1990s, researchers at Cornell University ran a study that would become one of the most cited findings in behavioral economics. They asked people to assess their own competence. The finding that entered textbooks: incompetent people consistently overestimate their ability. What got left out of most summaries, the finding that matters here, is that highly competent people consistently underestimate theirs. They know enough to know what they don't know, and that knowledge becomes a cage. David came from a family where money was discussed in hushed tones, treated as slightly shameful, a practical necessity that decent people managed carefully and never flaunted. He understood this as humility. What it actually was a class signal. A signal that said, we earn, we do not own. We work, we do not accumulate. We are different from the people who build wealth, and being different from them is something to be proud of. He graduated with $87,000 in student debt at 26. This is not remarkable. In the decade he graduated, the average graduate student in the United States left school carrying $71,000. Across all borrowers that year, $1.7 trillion in outstanding student debt. Translated into human time, if every borrower worked 40 hours a week and dedicated every dollar to repayment, the average worker would need just over 4 years of total labor. Not food, not rent, nothing, just the debt. David did what the system suggested. He found stable employment. He enrolled in his employer's 401k. He contributed 6%, the amount that maximized the employer match, the amount every article told him to contribute. He read the allocation options carefully, chose a moderate risk index fund, and left it alone the way the books said to. What he did not do, what most people with his profile do not do, is build any position that could appreciate independently of his labor. Every month, the money he accumulated was contingent on him continuing to show up. He was not building an asset. He was building a smaller version of his salary. They were playing the game correctly. Here is the psychology that nobody talks about honestly. There is a pattern called analysis paralysis, and it is not a flaw in intelligent people. It is a feature. Intelligent people survive by analyzing. They were rewarded their entire educational lives for the quality of their analysis, not the quality of their action. A student who acts fast and gets the answer wrong fails. A student who takes longer, checks, rechecks, and gets it right is praised. This is the training. Bring that training into a financial environment and watch what happens. David identified a real estate opportunity in 2014. A small multifamily property in a transitional neighborhood he knew well. The numbers were compelling. He ran them 3 times. He consulted 2 friends with finance backgrounds. He read 12 articles about the risks of leveraged real estate. He made a spreadsheet. He made a second spreadsheet that was a sensitivity analysis of the first spreadsheet. He did not think any of this consciously. He thought, the risk profile doesn't match my current allocation strategy. They were playing the game correctly. In 1997, a financial analyst named Anita Bott wrote a 34-page internal memo at a mid-sized investment firm. Her core argument: the products, the language, the educational materials, and the media coverage were all calibrated to keep educated workers engaged, contributing, and trusting, while systematically diverting their attention from the mechanisms by which wealth is actually concentrated. She was not a whistleblower. She was just an analyst who followed the numbers to an uncomfortable place. The memo was read by 3 people. One forwarded it to legal. The other 2 filed it. Bott left the firm 18 months later. She has given exactly 2 interviews in the last 20 years. In both of them, she says the same thing. The people who most needed to hear what I wrote were the educated ones. They were the least likely to believe it. Now look at the money. Not the feelings about the money. The money. Between 1989 and 2019, 30 years, the wealth held by the top 1% of Americans grew from $4.9 trillion to $35.4 trillion. The wealth held by the bottom 50% grew from $0.7 trillion to $1.9 trillion. If wealth were distance, and the top 1% started in Chicago and the bottom 50% started in Los Angeles, 30 years later the top 1% would have reached the moon. The bottom 50% would be in Denver. The mechanism that produced this is not greed. Greed is a character flaw, and character flaws can be corrected. The mechanism is structural, legal, incentivized, and almost entirely invisible to the people operating inside it. Here is how it works. The American tax code taxes labor income at a top rate of 37%. It taxes capital gains, money made from owning things, at a maximum of 20%. If you work for your money, the government takes more than 1/3. If your money works for you, the government takes less than 1/4. This is not a secret. It is federal law, publicly available, written in plain language. The reason it does not change, the reason both parties maintain it with remarkable consistency, is that the people who benefit from it are the people who fund the people who write it. David's income, taxed at 28%. His investment portfolio appreciated 8% this year, taxed at 15% on gains he won't realize for decades. Meanwhile, a private equity partner in the same city paid an effective tax rate of 11% on $4.2 million in carried interest. Income legally classified as a capital gain despite being, functionally, a salary, which meant David's government-approved, education system-endorsed path to financial security was, by design, slower than the path available to people who had already left it behind. The system was not broken. It worked exactly as designed. The only question is, designed for whom? December 2018. A financial planning conference in Phoenix, Arizona. A panel of 4 advisors, all credentialed, all with decades of client experience. The moderator asks, what is the single biggest mistake you see intelligent, high-earning clients make repeatedly? 3 of the 4 give versions of the same answer. They wait too long to take risk. They over-diversify too early. They optimize for safety in a system that rewards ownership. The 4th panelist, a woman who had spent 17 years managing money for ultra-high net worth clients before starting her own independent practice, says something that makes the room go quiet. She says, the mistake isn't in the behavior. The behavior is rational given the information they receive. The mistake is in who is giving them the information and why. Nobody follows up on this. Nobody asks what she means. The session ends. People collect their credits and go to lunch. They were playing the game correctly. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that individuals with graduate degrees are statistically less likely to hold equity in private businesses than individuals who stopped their education at high school or less. The more education you have, the more likely you are to work for the wealth-building vehicle rather than own one. The behaviors that make people excellent at generating income, the thoroughness, the precision, the refusal to move without sufficient data, are exactly the behaviors the wealth accumulation system does not reward. The system rewards ownership, speed, and tolerance for asymmetric risk. These are not virtues that graduate school teaches. Graduate school teaches you to be an exceptional employee. Now, think about the last 12 months of your actual life. Was there a moment where something was offered, a conversation, an opportunity, a direction that felt uncomfortable, and you did not take it? And the reason you gave yourself was intelligent, reasonable, and completely defensible. Ask yourself this: was that reason yours? Or was it built for you, out of everything you were taught, everything you were rewarded for, everything the system needed you to believe in order to keep doing what you were already doing? This happened to other people. In another country, another decade, another tax bracket. That is the comfortable version. The less comfortable version is this: the structural conditions that produced David at that kitchen table on a cold Tuesday morning are not extraordinary. They are standard. They are the expected outcome of a system that requires large numbers of highly skilled, highly educated, financially literate people to remain dependent on their labor, because without that dependence, the machinery stops. The financial services industry generated $4.8 trillion in global revenue last year. The education debt industry generated $49 billion in interest payments alone in the United States. The majority from graduate students who did what they were told and went further in school because the data said it would pay off. The data was right. For some of them, maybe you have already seen this pattern somewhere in your own life. The job you stayed in 2 years past the moment you knew it had stopped working for you. The investment approach you kept because you had read enough to know the risks of changing it. The conversation you didn't have because you were too busy running the analysis. Maybe you are in the middle of something that feels a little like this right now. A structure that is comfortable and correct and going slowly in the wrong direction. Maybe this is the first time you have thought about it. There is a person in your life, a parent, a friend, a colleague who is educated, careful, diligent, and financially stuck. Not through laziness, not through ignorance, through the specific, refined, highly developed capacity to find reasons why not yet is smarter than now. They were playing the game correctly. The question that stays after everything else resolves is not what to do differently. It is whether the game you have been playing was ever designed for you to win.